I'm Annette Kirkland, and welcome to Beyond the Gates. In this season, we are talking about leading with innovation. Today, our episode, we're going to be talking about protecting waters, preserving traditions. I am with Nia Hurst, research biologist with ERDC's Environmental Laboratory, otherwise known as EL. Good morning, Nia.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And we have a lot to talk about. One of my favorite questions is, tell me about yourself, your background, and your role at ERDC.
Absolutely. So yes, as you said, I'm a research biologist at ERDC in the environmental lab. I've been with ERDC for a little over 6 years now. And so my background in research is in wetland biogeochemistry, which is essentially studying nutrient cycling in wetlands. And at ERDC, I typically study nutrient cycling as it relates to wetland creation, management, function, design, things of that nature. And specifically at ERDC, my research is interested in how we can use wetlands to solve environmental problems. So think of things like using wetlands in the Great Lakes to remove phosphorus pollution, or how can we design mangrove forests to better withstand hurricane impacts. So how do we use wetlands in the environment as an applied solution?
How long have you been at ERDC?
6 years.
6 years. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. So here we go. To start, can you give us a big picture look at the Planning Assistance to States program, PASS? You know, we're all about acronyms around here.
Yeah.
And how does it support non-federal sponsors?
Yeah, so the Planning Assistance to the States program, or PAS or PASS, it's an excellent program through USACE, or the Army Corps, and it's designed to support states, local governments, and tribes to develop and utilize water resources or help them deal with any water-related resource issues. So think of projects that deal with maybe stormwater or flood risk management, watershed planning, stream assessments, GIS mapping, etc. And the way the program works, which is why I think it's really cool, is that it's through a 50-50 cost-sharing mechanism. Mm-hmm. So essentially, USACE will put up 50% of the funding for a project, and then the non-federal sponsor will put up the other 50%. So if a project is $50,000, USACE will front $25,000, and then the non-federal sponsor will put up the other $25,000. For tribes, however, federally recognized tribes, they actually have a cost share waiver, which means that up to a certain amount, the total cost of the project is waived. So for example, if the cost share waiver is about $500,000, then if a project is under $500,000, USACE foots the entire bill for it.
Wow, okay. Okay. So many communities struggle with coastal erosion and flood risk. How does PASS help them tackle those challenges?
Great question. So for communities dealing with coastal erosion and flood risks, the program can help in two main ways. So we have two mechanisms. One is through comprehensive planning, and the other is through technical assistance. So comprehensive planning includes planning for the development or use of water conservation in your area. And so it can provide insight on how to address water resource challenges. So basically building a plan for you or for stakeholders. And so this could involve developing flood risk management plans, or developing a plan to reduce shoreline erosion and increase coastal resiliency. So essentially building a plan for how to address a water resource issue that you might be having. The other way is through technical assistance, which I like to describe as essentially supporting those plans. Okay. So if you have a water management plan for your state, or you're trying to develop one, we can collect hydrology, soil samples, we can do some environmental data collection, some risk analysis to help you better use your plan, or to give you data to incorporate into your plan.
Okay.
So those are two main ways that we can do that.
And so I understand PASS also plays a role in water quality. How can those studies make a difference in environmental health?
Yes, absolutely. So comprehensive water planning, I think, is probably one of the best mechanisms. And so through that work that I'm familiar with, through the program, so some of these plans can include things like improving water quality through watershed assessment studies. So helping to plan for those studies, helping to execute those studies. And so those studies can assess things like algal blooms
Right.
or E. coli contamination. And so those plans can help identify causes of those problems, but then also provide solutions for remediation.
Such a hot topic right now, too.
Oh, 1,000%.
Such a hot topic right now.
1,000%. And then these can be, huge things like watershed levels, but they can also be as small as extreme assessments. And so I think another example of that would be a stormwater management plan. And so that could provide plans on how to treat stormwater runoff, the pollutions that might be inside of it as well. So because the PAS program is all around water resources, water quality is a huge part of that program.
Okay. So when we think about flood risk, sediment control, and water quality, they all tie into infrastructure resilience. How do past supported studies benefit both military installations and local communities?
That is another really good question, and I think
So I did good on these questions.
you did. You did great. And I'm thinking there are a lot of ways in which we can benefit both the military installations and local communities. I think one of the easiest answers is through coastal resiliency.
Right.
Because we have a lot of military infrastructure on the coast.
Right.
In fact, a colleague of mine and I just went to Okinawa, Japan, to help them understand some of their infrastructure issues that they might be having.
Okay.
And so we have a lot of installations on the coast, including bases and military training areas, and improving coastal resiliency through things like erosion studies, wave studies, surveys, mapping. Those really help our military installations and the people on them maintain their mission so that they can continue to train, they can continue their operations. There's no sort of lapse in what they need to do. But also, the communities also get to enjoy those benefits of a healthy coastline, whether that be recreation or just boating, or things of like more structural benefits like storm surge protection and wave attenuation or hurricane protection. There's no reason why they can't be a benefit to both, right? People live on the coast, and the military also does a lot of operations
right.
on the coast.
Right. Just benefit both.
And so it's typically a dual benefit when we're doing these types of projects. And in fact, a lot of what we do, we try to seek these, double, triple wins or benefits when we're doing these projects. You always want to make sure that we're trying to get the most return on investment or most benefits that we can get out of the work that we're doing.
Okay. So looking ahead, what new challenges or opportunities do you see for past studies?
So I'll probably be a little biased because I'm a wetland scientist.
That's okay.
And while I work in a variety of wetlands, from inland wetlands to, floodplain wetlands, riparian wetlands, things like that, I do think that the coastal environment is going to have a big opportunity. I was just talking about coastal resiliency and coastal erosion, but I think a lot of future work related to mitigating natural hazards will be both a challenge and opportunity for PAS. So thinking of more things like maybe like increased flooding, I guess both on the coast and riverine is possible, but more studies related to flood risk reduction are likely to increase. And through these studies, we can do things like determine where an area is most likely to flood, when it's most likely to flood, but then also provide management strategies for sort of minimizing that impact. So if we know when and where and how it's going to flood, how can we reduce it? How can we minimize that risk?
Right.
And so I think that is going to be both a challenge for this program, but I think we're going to have a lot more opportunities to assess things like that.
Okay. So shifting gears a bit, wild rice has both cultural and ecological significance. Can you talk about why it's so important?
Yes. So I love talking about this project.
Okay.
And
Awesome.
and this work. So working in and with wild rice is something that my team, we've been doing for almost 5 years at this point, maybe a little over 5 years at this point. So wild rice, also known as manumin in Ojibwe. So I might be going back and forth. I'll try to stick to wild rice. But we also do use manumin a lot. So you're correct. It is a culturally, ecologically, and economically important resource. And it's important to everyone, I think, but I think it's especially important to our tribal partners, where it's been a sacred food source for thousands of years. And it's a vital part of their religious ceremonies. But beyond that, wild rice grows in fringe and riparian wetlands. That's how I got involved. Because it's a wetland environment. And these wetlands, as all wetlands do, I'm a huge champion for wetlands.
So it only grows in wetlands? Is that
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so these wetlands improve water quality, supports the aquatic food chain, reduces flood risks, among a variety of the things that wetlands can do. I like to refer to wetlands as the kidney of the ecosystem, or most wetland scientists think of wetlands as the kidney of an ecosystem. And so they're really incredible systems that do a really great job at filtering out pollutants. So as water flows through it and it comes out downstream, I mean, the water quality improvement is incredible moving through a wetland. And so wild rice, of course, is important culturally to these tribes, was also important to us as wetland scientists and folks who work in and around wetlands, because they are incredible champions at water quality improvement and storm wave attenuation and all these great things. And so that's why we're very interested in wild rice and making sure it stays around.
Okay. Well, and you're proving something that everyone that sits in this chair proves, is that people that work with ERDC, they're very passionate about what they do. And I say this all the time, you cannot teach passion, and you are naturally passionate about these projects. And so it shows. So just letting you know that my theory is still being proved every day when we interview people for this show.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I mean, you are so correct. I think there's so many people at ERDC it's one of the beautiful things about ERDC, I think, is that there's so much passion in what people do. I mean, don't stick someone in a room and ask them about their job, because they will not.
Well, and that's the super fun about it, is that, it's actually hard to get people to talk about themselves, because, and that's what we do at the beginning of the show, is we try to get people to talk about themselves, just to humanize the show and let them know these are just normal people doing some fantastic things. And then everybody just wants, let me just talk about what I'm doing. I don't want to talk about me. I want to talk about what I'm doing. So you're proving this fact again. So understanding that wild rice production has faced some challenges in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. What's been happening over the past few decades?
Yes. So another thing that I really love about ERDC is that a lot of what we do is applied. So we try to provide applied solutions to problems.
Right.
And a lot of times what happens is that people will come to us with a problem that they need to solve, and then we'll work towards that. And so for this work, our tribal partners in northern Michigan, specifically the Lackawanna Desert tribe, or LVD, they reported extensive declines in their wild rice populations, or in their region. And this decline, of course, alters the ecological, cultural, and economic services that the wild rice can provide, right? So essentially, if you're losing a lot of this wild rice area, you're also losing a lot of this wetland habitat area, the aquatic food chain, recreation. So you're depleting a lot of other resources and ecosystem services that these wild rice and wetlands provide. And so over the years, over the last few decades, they've seen an extensive decline in wild rice production, and they've tried several management strategies like seeding, a lot of other restoration efforts, but none of those, unfortunately, have actually panned out. And so because of that, they applied to the PAS program, the PAS program, for assistance. And just in case there are any botany folks out there listening, the wild rice I'm referring to is Zizania palustris.
To be exact.
To be exact, because I am not a botanist, but I have a botanist on my team on this project, and I think he'd be very upset if I identify the species of wild rice
Okay, you can check that mark.
that I'm referring to. So yes, we're studying Zizania palustris and the decline in that specific species in the upper peninsula of Michigan.
Okay. So how is ERDC's environmental laboratory involved in studying and restoring wild rice population?
So through the PAS program, through our Detroit district, we started on this PAS program, and of course in deep collaboration with LVD. We worked to develop a project to better understand the causes of wild rice productivity declines and to identify solutions and provide restoration opportunities. And so what we did for this work is actually we did 2 projects. And so we worked in conjunction with the tribe to identify which lakes they saw that were struggling and that needed some help. And so we developed 2 projects. The first one is a mapping project where we go and we map the locations and extent of current wild rice and where it is. So this helps us to better understand from year to year actually where the declines are happening. It lets the tribe know the extent of what helps them to have a scientific, a scientific basis for their losses.
Right.
And so up until now,
There's a reason.
Yes, it's been mostly observations of it happening, but no quantifiable, it was this big, now it's this small, or things like that. And so we are essentially mapping how much wild rice there is, where it occurs. The second part of the project is looking at causes of declines. So really trying to understand if we're seeing wild rice production decline, where is it happening and possibly why? So we're taking things like water quality samples, water level data, nutrient data, soil samples, because all of those play into wild rice production. So we got to think of hydrology, we got to think of water quality, we got to think of soil substrate, and then we have to think of vegetation and vegetative competition. And so we have all these environmental factors that we are looking at. And so to do this, we had to build essentially a multidisciplinary team so that we could look at all of these factors. And so on our team, we have a botanist, we have a soil scientist, we have a biogeochemist, that's me. And so that we could better monitor all these different factors and to figure out maybe which ones are causing these declines that we're seeing. And so it's pretty extensive. And so it's a long-term monitoring mechanism that we've pursued. And so that is what was going on for about 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we had one during COVID, so we had to skip a year.
Right.
But we implemented this long-term monitoring plan so that we could help assess what problems that the rice may be having with its production. But then the plan is to also be able to have that monitoring mechanism still in place, once we move on, so that the tribe and other stakeholders can still better understand how this wetland habitat is changing over time.
Okay. So researching something like wild rice decline involves both science and history. What methods are being used to understand what's causing the decline?
So, yes. So this is one of my, I think, favorite parts of the project because, so my background is in wetland biogeochemistry. I'm a wetland scientist. I'm on the wetlands team at ERDC. And so we have a lot of scientific background that we can bring to this project. But I think one of the special things that this project does is that it leverages our strengths in wetland science and background with tribal knowledge, so with this generational knowledge that the tribe can provide. And so they have a lot of insight and background on wetland ecology, on wild rice ecology. They have a lot of information that may not be documented in text somewhere, but they know when and where this rice has been occurring. And then what we can do is essentially, if you tell us, where it used to be or where it is, we can go and map it and have that actually sort of so transferring that generational knowledge into actual science that they can have on hand to say, we know this is where rice should be or it used to be, and now here it is documented of where it actually is. And so we're really leveraging that knowledge with research techniques. And so since the causes of declining productivity, as I said, could be related to changes in water quality or high water levels or soil properties, we essentially had to, of course, build this team to do this monitoring. And so basically some of the methods that we deployed were water level loggers, water level monitoring. So we could look at to see how water levels change throughout a growing season. We collected soil and water samples to better look at soil substrates, nutrient quality in the soils. We did the same thing for water quality as well. Our botanists went out and actually counted wild rice plants to see how many were there and sort of, how they're growing. And then that's actually a really fun part of the project. Because counting, and I like to give our botanist a hard time because he's great, Kevin Philly, he's wonderful. But like a lot of my work is like digging up soil cores and trying to pull them out of the ground. And his vegetation monitoring is so great. Not all vegetation monitoring is great, but this one in particular was like us on like kayaks, going through the wild rice, counting it, moving on.
It's not
really
boring
great.
work
It's
at all.
not boring work at all. At all. And so, so some of the methods, a lot of the methods are, a lot of it is field-based, so actually going to these lakes. But then we've also had some greenhouse experiments that we've had to pursue to look at germination rates. And then we've also had some lab-based studies as well. So thinking about, so we can in the lab mimic environmental conditions. And so, taking samples from a lake and saying, hey, if water levels were too high or this was too low, how would that affect wild rice production? And so actually doing some controlled experimental studies in the lab as well.
Okay.
We've done that.
So environmental factors like water levels and soil quality obviously play a role in plant growth. How do those, along with mapping technologies, impact wild rice?
Yes. So wild rice is, I like to say it's a little picky. So it has a relatively narrow range of conditions that it likes to grow in. So in terms of hydrology, it needs slow-moving water at a shallow depth. It tends to be heavily tied to nitrogen availability. It likes a particular type of soil substrate, doesn't do well with vegetative competition. And so it tends to sort of, it's a little picky. And so we have to assess all of those different factors to see what could be impacting wild rice in those lakes. And so I think a little bit of what we've discovered is that because of this narrow range of water quality, water level, vegetative competition, if even one of those is significantly out of balance, then the whole system can shift. And so we have about 12 lakes that we've been monitoring and that we've been looking at. And so I think what we've discovered is that across these 12 lakes, the problems aren't all the same. And that's also why we need to build this team, because if we had just looked at water quality, that might not have given us the answer. If we had just looked at soil substrate, we might not have seen it. And so one lake might have no other vegetative cover, it might have great water quality, but the soils are terrible. Or another lake might have great soil and the water levels are perfect, but the pH is off. And so trying to sort of tease out sort of which of these factors, because again, wild rice has that very particular range it likes to grow in, which of these factors is off.
Right.
And the reason why we did that is so that we could go back to our partners who wanted to do restorations, and because this is wild rice restoration, but really wetland restoration, we can go back and we can say, in this particular lake, this is the main problem we have. In this lake, or in this wild rice habitat, this is a problem that you're having and how you can remediate it. So trying to provide specific guidance, because again, ERDC, we try to provide applied solutions to environmental problems.
Right.
And so telling you exactly sort of what you need to do to help restore this wetland is a big part of this work. And so again, so back to your the mapping strategy as well. I think the mapping part of it is also pretty significant because again, that gives us a baseline for how the wild rice itself and its habitat is moving and changing over time. So that gives us a good baseline for it. And then so in some years where it's low or some years where it's high, we can sort of better understand maybe why that change is happening.
Okay. So, big picture. How does ERDC's work in environmental research from wild rice restoration to watershed management support Army and DoD sustainability efforts?
So I said a lot of good things about ERDC already. So I think our research in the environmental lab really exemplifies the nature of, again, the applied solutions that are developed by ERDC. And a lot of what we do in the environmental lab, I mean, there's so much that we do, whether it's wetland restoration, contaminant remediation, large-scale water quality studies, invasive species deterrence. I mean, PFAS studies. I can't even think of all of the things that we do. But all of those things are inherently designed to increase the existence and longevity of our natural resources, both for us and for future generations. A lot of it is, we want to increase the longevity, but oftentimes we also want to increase that utilization. And so we want to restore wetlands or create wetlands because they're inherently wonderful, but also because restoring wetlands helps to increase our coastal resiliency.
Right.
Building wetlands within navigation channels can help us to improve navigation, help us to improve navigation and keep commerce flowing. Mm-hmm. One of our main directives at the core itself is dredging. So how to utilize that dredged sediment in other ways so that it's more cost effective than just maybe, dumping it somewhere. But how do we use it beneficially within our environment? So a lot of what we do at ERDC and at EL is to essentially, increase the longevity of these natural resources that we love so much.
Awesome. So, as I'm speaking with Nia Hurst, a research biologist with ERDC's Environmental Laboratory, otherwise known as EL, we're talking about protecting waters, preserving traditions, and we are wrapping up with this last question. This has gone by so super fast. To wrap up, what's the key takeaway you'd like our listeners to have from this valuable conversation?
So, I think one of the key takeaways is, maybe I'll give you two.
Okay, that would be great.
And I'll give you two.
Okay.
Because I've thought of some more as we've been having this conversation. So, I think one of the main takeaways is that a lot of the work that we do at the core and at ERDC can sometimes maybe seem like a black box. But a lot of what we do is very much applied to benefiting, not just the Corps, not just our military, but to our local communities and the people that live around us, making it easier to live, safer, both in terms of coastal protection, but also think is water quality and safe drinking water, safe water to swim in. And so, I think one of the bigger takeaways is that a lot of what we do, we can combine all this scientific rigor with this generational knowledge to help us better manage these water resources, amongst a variety of resources. So I think wild rice that we talked about today is a really good example, but it's just one example. In pairing sort of the power of ERDC, which we sometimes like to say that pairing the power of ERDC with this generational knowledge can really help us to protect these natural resources and services that can create more resilient communities. And I think that more opportunities for that collaboration should be explored.
Right.
And then my final key takeaway is that if you're not familiar with wetlands, I implore you to explore them. to better understand how beneficial they are. I guarantee you there's one, unless you maybe live in Wyoming. But
Right, exactly. Maybe that one place.
Far off. You may not always see them and see their benefit, but if you're in Mississippi, I promise you, they're helping to improve your water quality. They're helping to improve your recreation. They're helping to, they're providing habitat for those fish that you love to fish.
I live at Eagle Lake. I totally understand.
Yes, yes, yes. They're providing all these services, and it's so important for us to maintain them, conserve them, create them, restore them, and all of those things. And so go out and also be champions for wetlands.
I like that. That's a great tagline at the end. Be champions for wetlands. Yes. Awesome. Well, Nia, thank you so much for being on the show today. I have totally enjoyed this.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. This was so great. You've been so great.